ASUS monitor boot loops occur when your monitor repeatedly cycles through startup without displaying a stable image. This frustrating issue prevents you from using your display normally and can be caused by several factors. The most obvious signs are blinking power LEDs and repeated display of the ASUS logo screen, where the monitor appears to turn on but gets stuck in a loop without showing your desktop or any video input. The most common causes include firmware glitches that corrupt the monitor's startup sequence, power supply issues like faulty capacitors in the internal circuitry, or problems with display connections such as incompatible cables or ports. Internally, boot loops often stem from hardware faults in the circuit board, such as corrupted EEPROM memory or voltage fluctuations in the power supply unit. Connection problems can arise from using uncertified cables or switching between different input types like HDMI, DisplayPort, or USB-C without proper handshakes. Understanding these causes is the first step to diagnosing and fixing your ASUS monitor boot loop. In the next sections, we'll explore specific troubleshooting steps to get you back up and running. The first and simplest fix for an ASUS monitor boot loop is power cycling. This process discharges residual electricity and clears temporary glitches. Start by viewing the 5 power cycling steps in this diagram. Unplug the monitor from the power outlet as shown here. Press and hold the power button on the monitor for 30 to 60 seconds. This discharges any residual electricity. Reconnect the power cable and try turning the monitor on. This resolves temporary software glitches in 70% of cases. A faulty or incompatible cable can cause boot loops. Ensure your HDMI or DisplayPort cable is securely connected to both your monitor and computer. Try using a different certified cable, especially if you're using HDMI 2.1 or DisplayPort 2.1. Sometimes, Windows 11 updates can cause EDID conflicts. A new cable can resolve this. Outdated or corrupted firmware is a primary culprit behind boot loops. Use ASUS's Armoury Crate software to check for monitor firmware updates. Launch Armoury Crate to scan for available updates. The interface shows your monitor's current firmware and any pending updates. Alternatively, visit the official ASUS support website, find your monitor model, and download the latest firmware. Use the manual flashing tool provided. As of Q3 2025, firmware version 3.2.1 significantly reduces boot loops by improving error handling. Service mode is an advanced feature that lets you reset your ASUS monitor to factory defaults or run internal diagnostics. It's useful for troubleshooting persistent issues, but requires careful handling. To access service mode on ROG models, press Menu plus down arrow plus Enter while powering on the monitor. This combination enters the diagnostic interface where you can perform resets or checks. Be extremely cautious when using service mode, as incorrect actions can void your warranty. Only proceed if you're comfortable with advanced troubleshooting and have backed up your settings. If software fixes like power cycling and firmware updates don't resolve the boot loop, the problem could be hardware related. Faulty capacitors in the monitor's power supply unit, or PSU, are a common hardware culprit. Capacitors store electrical energy and help regulate voltage, but when they fail, they can cause boot loops, especially during voltage fluctuations. The power supply unit is responsible for converting and regulating the electrical power that runs the monitor. A schematic diagram shows the circuit layout with components like resistors, capacitors, and transformers working together. In a disassembled monitor, you can see the circuit board with capacitors and other components. Failed capacitors often show visible signs like swelling, burning, or electrolyte leakage, which disrupts the power supply and causes boot loops. In early 2025, ASUS launched a voluntary recall program for certain 2023-2024 models with faulty capacitors in the PSU. Contact ASUS support to verify if your monitor qualifies for a free power supply unit replacement. Prevention and best practices are essential to avoid future boot loop issues with your ASUS monitor. First, always use certified cables. Certified USB or HDMI cables ensure proper data transfer and power delivery, reducing the risk of handshake failures that can cause boot loops. Second, avoid overclocking your monitor or using features like AuraSync excessively. Overclocking increases refresh rates beyond safe limits, while constant lighting effects can overheat components and lead to instability. Third, ensure a stable power supply, ideally with an uninterruptible power supply or UPS. This protects your monitor from power surges or drops that can cause hardware faults leading to boot loops. Finally, regularly check for firmware updates via the Armory Crate application. ASUS releases patches that address known issues, preventing software conflicts that trigger boot loops. By following these prevention and best practices, you'll minimize the risk of software and hardware conflicts that cause boot loops, ensuring long-term monitor reliability. If you've exhausted all troubleshooting steps and the boot loop persists, it's time to contact ASUS support or a qualified electronics repair technician. They can diagnose more complex hardware issues or perform specialized firmware flashing. Contact ASUS support through their official website for model-specific guidance. For hands-on repairs, seek a qualified electronics technician who can handle complex hardware issues. Always consult ASUS support first to avoid voiding your warranty during repairs.